Hey guys, Omni here. Earlier today, we got some exciting DC news that I really wanted to talk about with you guys today. So it's being reported by The Wrap, as well as being reiterated by Variety and THR, so there very much could be some credibility to these claims. But right now, it's being reported that Michael Keaton is in early talks to reprise the role of Batman after 30 years in the upcoming Flash solo film directed by Andy Muschietti and starring Ezra Miller. And we know that over the past couple of years, DC has slowly been building up this concept of the multiverse. We've seen it a lot on the small screen with the Arrowverse, really making that a core concept of these shows, culminating in the Crisis on Infinite Earths event this past fall. And that really opened a lot of doors because it not only crossovered between the various shows, but dipped into a lot of external DC properties as well, such as the Adam West Batman, Christopher Reeve's Superman made some connections in there. The 89 Batman came into play, Birds of Prey, the old canceled show Smallville. And then it really jumped the shark in the best of ways when Ezra Miller himself cameoed as his Flash from the Justice League in the gear and everything, meeting Grant Gustin's Flash face to face, opening the doors wide open in a way that we didn't really expect up until this point. We always thought, the TV stuff, that's fine. They'll interplay before, but when this is something crossing over directly from the current films into these shows, expanding this, and that's something that I think DC's been really trying to hammer in here recently as well, to expand beyond committing to one version of said characters. This is apparent by, of course, Jared Leto's Joker, and then spinning off into Joaquin Phoenix's solo Joker film, which is a standalone film in its own continuity away from the DC connected universe, as well as the Batman with Robert Pattinson also being disconnected from that, or Batfleck and all that other stuff, all on its own. They're very much building up these various cosmoses to separate all these things so everybody can kind of pick and choose their direction, where they want to go. It allows them to be creative in different ways. And then they're really going to be incorporating that into this Flashpoint story for the Flash solo film. In the comic itself, it really all hinges on Barry Allen going back in time, which we saw some hints of that in his cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths, because he mentions to Grant Gustin that Vic was right as they were experimenting. As we know, this is also taken from Zack Snyder's Justice League sequel scripts, that him and Cyborg and the others were experimenting with this device to launch him into time, allow him to have the ability to time travel and break these dimensional barriers, which allowed him to enter the Speed Force, therefore meeting the Grant Gustin, Flash, and them talking about this. And that really is playing a part of it. And I wouldn't be surprised if not seeing that exact scene in the Flash solo film, but maybe having a call out to it, or a reminiscent, just a throwaway line referencing it, I wouldn't be surprised to put it past it at this point, because not only is the story, because the original Flashpoint story really only ties with its own timeline. What happens in that story, if you're not aware, Barry Allen makes the decision to go back in time to save his mother. He finally has the ability to do so, and he's in a moment of selfishness, decides to go back in time and save his mother from his murder at the hands of the Reverse Flash. And in doing so, it creates an alternate timeline in which things are slightly different by small increments, and then other things are vastly different. The Justice League does not exist. It eventually culminates in this war between the Atlanteans and the Amazonians, which just wreaks havoc on all the humans of the planet, as well as the joke, Bruce Wayne is the one dies in the alley, and Batman is Thomas Wayne, his father, and at the loss of her own son, Martha Wayne becomes that universe's Joker, and that expands out. Of course, Thomas Wayne is a much darker Batman, and with the castings that they had initially in BVS, a lot of people were looking forward to seeing who would come into the forefront as far as that goes, especially Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who has made a huge name for himself as Negan on The Walking Dead. A lot of people were really excited to see him come in and play this alternate version, this darker version of Batman, who is the father of Bruce in this way that we haven't seen before. But how it all goes about, Flash eventually goes back, resets it, stops himself from saving his mother, therefore setting the timeline not perfectly back into the place the way it was, but leaving it just similar enough with some slight variations and changes. Because a good comparison that I remember being made is like, once you break a glass, you can put it back together the best you can, but all the pieces aren't going to fit quite so perfectly. So even though he put things back to the way they were, his interaction with it still causes a change. So that could result in a lot of the recastings that they want to do with either Ben Affleck's Batman, or have some variations to deviate from some of those stories while keeping some of the other ones the same, such as Wonder Woman or Aquaman, since those franchises seem to be doing fine on their own, or opening the door for different things for Henry Cavill's Superman. So this brings into question, how does Michael Keaton's Batman come into play? So the article also talks about, and some others as well, because I've cross-referenced a couple of different ones, they make reference that this is not only going to include time travel, which the original really only involved time travel. He went back, he changed time, which resulted in an alternate future, not an alternate reality, but an alternate future in the same timeline. Now we're also getting hints that it might even be interdimensional, where he crosses over into other multiverses, into a different universe altogether. Maybe while he's trying to figure out the time travel part of it, or maybe it'll expand into a different aspect of that. And this is where it comes into question, because Ben Affleck's future involvement in this is still, even though there's a lot of hope that maybe the reception for the Snyder Cut might reignite some faith in returning him into it, or reignite his own passion for the role for him to return and maybe do something post Snyder Cut. Who knows? It's all on the fence right now. But what this is going to be tying into, and as we've seen, he did breach into an alternate dimension when he made his cameo on Crisis on Infinite Earths. So this begs the question, why Michael Keaton? Now, there's a couple of areas you can take with this, and I've read it in a couple of different ways, because they did say, at least in this article, the original one by The Wrap, they talk about, he goes back in time, creates this alternate future where he goes in, the Justice League is not around, and Bruce Wayne himself is Michael Keaton, but 30 years older and a lot darker, which doesn't really add up with what the world we know here. What I think might actually be the case, now here's where I'm going to give you a couple different options. If they do happen to sign on Michael Keaton into this role, could he then be the replacement for Ben Affleck, who already was an older Batman? So they could bring him in here and he could just pick up where we left off. And then that might be a little messy, considering that we have he's played a previous Batman. He's coming in to take over for Ben Affleck's Batman. I don't think that's going to be the case. I know some people have been floating that around, especially on Twitter, now that this is going around right now, just hot off the presses just a few hours ago. So a lot of people are really speculating on how this could come through. I don't think that's going to be the case, because I think that would muddy things up a bit. What I think might actually be the case is when he's figuring this out, because we don't know the scale at which Michael Keaton's going to be involved in this. So here's the thing. Jeffrey Dean Morgan could be out as Thomas Wayne and might be replaced with Michael Keaton as Thomas Wayne in this, as an older Thomas Wayne, donning the cowl of the darker, edgier Batman in this alternate timeline that is the result of the Flash's interactions, rather than Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Even though I really still want to see that version, I want to see him play Thomas Wayne once again, because I think that was, you don't make that casting and then waste it, in my opinion. But who knows? WB has been wasting a lot of casting choices here recently. Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, and who knows? I wouldn't put it past them, but right now they've been doing really good at staying on a positive track, and I would like to see them continue that. Now, the alternative could be, of course, like I said, he could be the replacement to Bruce Wayne now that Ben Affleck is out. Again, I think that would be muddy. But I'll present you a third option, since we know that Ezra Miller's Flash has crossed over into alternate properties, breaching not just time, but the multiverse itself, meaning Grant Gustin. Maybe he enters the Batman 89 multiverse and just meets an older version of Michael Keaton's original Batman. Maybe it's a small glimmer. Maybe it's a window into an alternate reality, and that's all it is. Just a little cameo. I would like it to be a little more substantial than that, but who knows? It could be really anything. I don't think you waste that if you get him to sign on, but I don't think it would be a good idea for him to be the Batman that replaces Ben Affleck, unless this is after the changes that he makes to the timeline, and thus when he returns to the present, Ben Affleck's Batman looks a little different and it's Michael Keaton again. Ooh, it also opens the door to maybe it's not the 89 Batman. What if we cross over and get this thing that a lot of people have been clamoring for many years, an older Bruce Wayne played by Michael Keaton, and this alternate universe, maybe it's not the past, maybe it's not the present. What if it's the future and we have Michael Keaton as an older Bruce Wayne, and maybe a lot of people that have really been, screaming at the top of their lungs for this for so many years, we finally have Terry McGinnis make an appearance in live action and opens the door to Batman Beyond. Maybe a solo Batman Beyond film or some spinoff like that to go down that road and see where that goes. There's a lot of different ways we can go with it. I personally would like to see him, if they're going to go with this multiverse route and really settle it and hit it hard home, that I think that they need to, or not that they need to, what I would like to see would be him like going through the Speed Force and seeing maybe these windows into some of the other multiverses and seeing maybe a glimpse, maybe even entering Michael Keaton's Batman universe, where we see Michael Keaton as Batman 30 years later at a different point in his life than we left him off in the previous time we saw him in the role under the cowl, and seeing what he can, maybe some advice or some inspiration that he can pass on to Ezra Miller's Flash. Because even though that's kind of what we got when he met Grant Gustin, they were talking about it, and Grant Gustin, his Flash has been Flash a lot longer chronologically than Ezra Miller's, and they passed off some wisdom between each other, and I really like that moment. No matter how you feel about the Arrowverse versus the DCEU, it's all the same. It's all DC, and that's how I feel about it all. I don't have disdain over one or the other. I love it all because I love DC, and I would like to see that you can just kind of interact even more and open up these doors. It's really interesting to see what can come from this. If it ends up paying off to be true, I just really still want to see Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Thomas Wayne. I want to see him as that darker Batman because he is in the prime for that. He's got, I would say typecast for it because of Negan, but I think that would be the interesting route to go and leave Michael Keaton as his own Batman in his own universe, not really, because we already know the 89 Batman does exist in the multiverse, so having him play multiple ones, you could get away with that. But if it is actually the Keaton one from 89, I would like that to be off on its own and not make the 89 Batman part of this continuity on this universe. And that's kind of the problem when you run in with these multiverses, because you gotta, it's a very thin line that you have to ride without confusing a lot of people. And it's going to be intriguing to see how they thread this needle if they do it. With it being simply a time travel story, I think that would have been the simplest way to go about getting this across and doing what they need to do, because I've said it before, I had a long rant video over a year ago talking about how even though I don't want the first Flash solo movie to be Flashpoint, because that is a huge storyline for the character, if they want to get their continuity in line, do new things while continuing the things that are successful, that's the only way to keep it in continuity and do those resets without just recasting, ignoring, and retconning things outright. I think that's the safest way to go for them to maintain their course while also changing it, if that makes any sense at all. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how this plays out. So it's not really stated anywhere because there's not a lot of details on what this is going to be about. I can ramble about this onward and onward and onward because I want that to leave it open for him to create the Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Thomas Wayne Batman also. And how would you all feel about that? Like, what route do you guys want to go? Because who knows? I seem like I might be in the minority as far as this goes. I know a lot of people like myself do want to see Jeffrey Dean Morgan come back and reprise that role as Thomas Wayne that he played in BVS, because it did seem to be an obvious setup, since we did know Zack Snyder wanted the Flash solo film to be tied into the Flashpoint storyline. As we saw, time travel was a part of the storyline of BVS, as well as the sequels to Justice League that he had planned to save them from the dark side apocalypse that was looming in the future. So I'm rambling on at this point. I want to know your thoughts. If we see Michael Keaton return as Bruce Wayne, as Batman, what way do you guys want to see him come back? Sound off in the comments. Let me know your thoughts so we can carry on the conversation after the video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you all are staying safe out there in the world. I will catch you guys in the next video. Take care, everybody.